Now I know you just clicked on this video, and before you even go down into the comment section and flame me for even advertising AP Ezreal support, just please let me explain where I got this idea from. So the other day I was scrolling along Twitter when I noticed one of my favorite support players, Stunt, former rank 1 support player might I add, posted a clip of himself playing full AP Ezreal support. And it got me thinking, so I decided to do a little bit of research. So I checked into his op.gg and did a little bit of testing myself, and turns out AP Ezreal support is pretty legitimate. And in this video I'm going to explain exactly how and why this pick works. If you do go on to enjoy this video, then be sure to leave a like, but without further ado, let's get into it.
Keep it on the level, keep it on the level. I'm climbing up the, keep it on the level.
So before we dive any more into how to play AP Ezreal support, let's first explain why it works. So AP Ezreal support was introduced into the game a very long time ago. It has kind of been around here and there, but it was just reintroduced into the game very recently after Ezreal had a little mini rework to his W. With his new W, you're able to proc quite a bit of AP damage that way, and then they also did a slight change to his ultimate recently, which got rid of the reduced damage for hitting multiple targets, which now means that you could do a lot more AoE damage, considering your ultimate does scale with AP. Another big reason that this was reintroduced into the game is because of the Dark Harvest rework, which made it a lot easier to do a lot more consistent damage. Of course, Dark Harvest has since been nerfed and hotfixed, but even now, AP Ezreal has been introduced already and has still shown to work even after the Dark Harvest nerfs. In other words, the whole reason that this works is because the damage output is absolutely crazy, and it is really difficult to play him in other lanes, mainly due to the fact that he has no wave clear. So even though the damage is really good, you can't play him as a mid lane, you can't play him as a top jungle or ADC, simply because of the lack of wave clear. However, you can still apply just as much damage while playing him in the support role and not have to worry about wave clearing, because supports don't have to CS after all. But even though we've now established that it is viable and that it does work, we still have to mention the cons. So let's go into the pros and cons now. One of the pros, as I mentioned, is the fact that you're able to apply a ton of damage and not have to worry about the wave clear. Another pro that I've already mentioned is the fact that you can now proc a lot more damage using the W and the slightly changed ultimate. Another pro, for at least right now, is the fact that the meta really suits AP damage supports. Down the road, this may be a little bit less viable and a little bit less strong, but the meta right now definitely favors AP supports, and that's why Ezreal is able to find a spot amongst the support meta. And now, of course, we have to address the cons, because AP Ezreal support, as fun as it may sound, and as much as I may be trying to play it off as though it's one of the strongest supports in the game, definitely has its downsides, and it is definitely not by any means one of the top supports in the game right now. The biggest downside of all from playing AP Ezreal support is going to be the lack of peel. Sure, you're able to put out a ton of damage and be able to carry the game that way, but you are not going to be able to help your teammates, or rather your ally, be able to stay alive longer and help them to be able to carry the game that way. There are other AP supports in the game, such as Xerath or Vel'Koz or Brand, who put out a lot of damage but also have a small amount of crowd control that do help their ADC stay alive from time to time and does allow them to peel. Ezreal, on the other hand, is all damage, and that's all you're going to be getting, and when you do lock in AP Ezreal support, that is what you are picking him for. You are going to be picking him so that you can put out damage, not so that you can peel for your teammates. If your team desperately needs peel, then this is probably not the champion that you want to lock in. Another con is definitely going to be the fact that Ezreal as a whole is not an easy champion. He is a champion that has a very high skill cap because he has a lot of skill shots in his kit. He's a champion that definitely shines a little bit more for higher elo players as well as the competitive scene, and low elo players as a whole are going to struggle more on this champion. I would have to say that it's slightly easier playing AP Ezreal support because you are not having your abilities up quite as often, and you don't have to auto attack in between your abilities. Instead, the majority of your damage is going to be a little bit more spread out, coming from just your abilities and not so much from your auto attacks, but even then he still is a fairly difficult champion to pick up and play. The final con that I'd like to mention revolves around his E. His E is typically used for mobility and escape and for repositioning in team fights. However, when you're playing AP Ezreal support, it's going to be very tempting sometimes to E forward in order to proc the damage from your W. And even though I myself, when I play this in Stunt, when he plays this as well, he will E forward and I will E forward from time to time in order to proc that damage, but you do have to be very mindful when you are doing so. Even though jumping forward with your E and proccing a lot of damage will be worth it from time to time, if you are doing so at the wrong times, you're going to put yourself in a very bad position, and if you don't have flash up, you are going to die more times than not. So I've already talked about this subject a little bit, but let's dive more into it now, and that is, when should you be picking full AP Ezreal support? I've got to say the two type of champions that you want to avoid playing AP Ezreal support into are going to be the hard engaged champions as well as the AP champions. Ezreal is a very squishy champion, and when playing him into hard engaged supports, if you do get hard engaged on, for example, let's say say you're playing against a Leona, Blitzcrank, Thresh, something along those lines, and they are able to engage on you successfully, chances are you're probably going to die instantly, and that's of course not what you want to happen, so avoid playing Ezreal into champions like that. The other type of champion that I mentioned is going to be the AP supports, and that is just because Ezreal is fairly short range besides his ultimate, so when you're playing against some other AP supports such as Vel'Koz or Xerath, even though you can go toe to toe with them as far as damage output, they're able to outrange you, and for that reason you're going to slowly lose the trades and slowly lose the lane that way. So on the other hand, the champions that you do want to be playing Ezreal into are going to be the sustain champions, otherwise known as the enchanter champions or caster champions, as well as the utility champions. So this includes stuff like Nami or Soraka or Janna or Taric. These kinds of champions, Ezreal can do more damage than they can sustain, and he can win the lane slowly by just out trading them and out poking them that way. Now for the skill order, it's going to be drastically different from what you would see as an AD Ezreal. You are going to be putting a point in Q to start the game, a point in E at level 2, and a point at W at level 3, and then from there on you're going to max W, then E, then Q last. At the same time, of course, you're going to be putting a point into your ultimate whenever possible. For those of you who don't know, Ezreal's W, E, and R all actually scale with magic damage rather than AD damage, so when you're building him full AP, that is why you're maxing your Q last in comparison to an AD Ezreal, where you max Q first. By maxing your W and your E first and second, you're going to be able to do a lot of damage given you land your W and are able to either proc that with the auto or Q, or if you have to, and I mean absolutely have to, dash forward with your E in order to proc the W. The very core build that I've seen for AP Ezreal support via Stunt has been starting off with a Spell Thieves, upgrading that once, not all the way up, just upgrading that to the 450 upgrade item, following that up with a Hextech Gunblade, then a Morellonomicon, and finally a Lichbane. With this core build, not only should you be able to do a ton of damage with your AP abilities, but also be able to provide a little bit of extra damage whenever you're auto attacking in between your abilities. And on top of all of that, with the Lichbane, the Hextech Gunblade, and your W proc on towers, you're able to take down towers pretty fast, which is really good, especially in the meta that we're in right now, where turret plating is super efficient when you are able to take it down in the early stages of the game. That is essentially going to be your core build, and then after that, feel free to just add any defensive items or AP items depending on what your team needs and what the enemy team composition is. For example, if you're up against a team comp that has a lot of AD, maybe consider something like Zhonya's. If you're up against a team that has a lot of AP, consider something like Banshees. And if you just want some more raw damage, you can definitely spend the gold to go something like Rabadon's Deathcap. So even though roaming is typically something that a lot of support champions should put a large emphasis on, that is not going to be the case for Ezreal. Sure, you can roam from time to time and try to pop in with the WE combo, WEQ combo, and try to land some damage that way. You can also try to roam from across the map essentially by casting your ulti and trying to pick up some kills across the map. But for the most part, you want to be focusing on the lane phase, again, using all the combinations of your items, your W, and your auto attacks in order to take down turrets really fast, and that is going to be the focus of Ezreal in the early game in comparison to other support champions that like to do a combination of both focus on lane phase and roaming. As the game progresses, you'll find yourself in the mid to late game, and the focus here is going to mainly be on team fighting. Ezreal can't really peel all that much, but he does have a lot of damage and a lot of AoE damage, so team fighting is going to be the main focus there. Try to just sit in the backline and try to hit the frontline targets, even though you have enough damage to assassinate enemy carries. Doing so will just put you in a really bad position and then ultimately get yourself killed in the process. So instead, it is much more efficient to just sit in the backline, try to hit the frontline carries, prioritize whatever target you're able to land your W on, cast your Q whenever it's up, cast your W whenever it's up, use your E wisely, don't use it just to proc damage, especially in team fights. Use your E to reposition, and use your ult to hit as many targets as possible or snipe a target that is low HP. During this time of the mid to late game, you may also find yourself running into some champions 1v1 on the enemy team. In these situations, your combo is mostly going to be a WEQ or a RWEQ if you are able to charge up a full ultimate from the Fog of War. But again, you don't want to be using your E in like this in a team fight situation. This is only for 1v1 situations. Overall though, if you put all of these things together that I mentioned in this video, you should be able to play AP Ezreal pretty efficiently, pumping out a ton of damage and being able to carry games single-handedly from the support role, and at the same time being top of the damage charts. Alright ladies and gentlemen, well that is going to conclude the end of this video. I hope you were able to find this video helpful. If you were, then be sure to leave a like, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to help the channel grow. I would like to give a major shout out to Stuntopolis, who introduced me to the full AP Ezreal support. I've had a lot of fun playing it, and also I've had a lot of success playing on it. So hopefully you guys can take all the information that I provided in this video and go test it out for yourself. Believe me when I say this is pretty legitimate. It is not troll whatsoever. I am a meta abuser. I'm not a fan of playing troll or off meta champions. So if I went as far to make a video about this pick, then you've got to know that I'm pretty serious about it, and I do believe that it is a good pick at the the moment. Anyways, I'd like to thank each and every one of you who did stay to the end of the video. I really do appreciate it, guys. Make sure you guys go give me a follow on Twitter and Twitch, as well as join my Discord using the links in the description. But anyways, I will see you guys in my next video. Peace.